Hey, what is up, investors? So in this video, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite 3D printing stocks, and that is Nano Dimensions, ticker symbol NNDM. Now, what we saw with Nano Dimensions is that this stock went to a high back in February, and then it came crashing down, actually coming down more than 50% of where it was at. And not only that, it could possibly be going down even more. But I think that there could be a good catalyst here that is overlooked, which is something that we're going to be talking about towards the end of the video. But I made sure that I put timestamps in this one so you guys can go through parts that you find interesting. Now, I am one of those YouTubers that do like to share financials, because I think if a YouTuber is talking about stocks and not talking about financials, then they probably shouldn't be talking about stocks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that we talk about the stock performance, then go into the financials, and then why did we see this stock drop? I'm going to give the reason why, and then I'm going to give my opinion of, is this stock a good investment and why? So go to the whatever part that you want in this video, but I would appreciate it if you guys did watch the whole thing entirely, because that does help me out with watch time and the algorithm. But speaking of the algorithm, if you guys don't mind as well, please do me a huge favor and please be sure to smash, destroy, and annihilate that like button, because that helps me out a lot, as well as subscribe if you have not already. And if you are interested in being a Patreon, I have one. Link is in the description. Thanks to all the Patreons, and there's a private Discord attached to that. All right, now let's get to it. So this is Nano Dimensions stock over the last 6 months, and when I first started talking about the stock on this channel, it was a penny stock. I was talking about it because this was added to ARK Invest, and it was a penny stock that they're investing into. I thought it was a great topic to talk about because it was having to do with 3D printing. But since that time, this stock has really broken out, and it went from being just a little penny stock to being valued a lot more. If we look at the 52-week range of the stock, it was trading between 51 cents and $17.89. And Nano Dimensions has a market cap of a little bit more than $1.3 billion. Now, looking at the stock, when it came into the new year, going into 2021, this is when the stock really broke out, and then it had this wild ride for the first quarter, and then the stock came crashing down. So I want to talk about what is going on here. Why did we see Nano Dimensions go up so much and then come down, which we thought it was probably going to start going back up going into the earnings report for the fourth quarter of 2020, and that earnings report was better than the earnings report that came out for the third quarter of 2020, which got the stock really moving. But what we're seeing is the stock is still coming down. So what I need to do is I need to cover the financials and the reasons why we're seeing the stock drop so much, and is it still worth investing into, is what we need to figure out. So we'll start first looking at their income statement, and we'll compare the last 2 quarters of 2020. So for Q3 2020, which is what came out in November of 2020, their total revenues were $441,000 versus net income of negative $20.87 million. In Q4 2020, much better situation. Total revenues of $1.99 million versus a net income of negative $17.58 million. Now let's take a look over at their balance sheet, and we'll make sure that we'll add their total assets here with including cash, so we have more of an understanding. So looking at Q3 2020 versus Q4 2020, we can already tell that it's a big improvement just off of the graph here. So for Q3 2020, their total assets were $63.27 million, and of that, $37.38 million was in cash and short-term investments versus a total liabilities of $9.69 million. Now Q4 2020, their total assets were $689.26 million, and most of that was all in cash and short-term investments, which was $671 million, versus the total liabilities of $21.29 million. Now, I also want to point out that Nano Dimensions hardly has any debt. So if Q4 2020 was better than Q3 2020, why did we see the stock price drop so much in February? And that actually has to do with dilution. Now, some people understand dilution, and some people don't like it when a company does dilution at all. So in the case of Nano Dimensions, they did a lot of dilution, and that is what affected them. So if you look at what they were doing back in October of 2020, when they diluted 7.3 million shares for a price of $2.30. They raised $16.92 million. Not a big deal. At that time, their market cap was $122.7 million, and it didn't really affect anything. But as you can see, as the stock price continued to go up, what do we see here? We see that they were diluting more and more shares, especially starting in December. They were diluting quite a bit. They diluted twice in December, diluted once in January, and diluted again in February. That's pretty consistent there, because in most cases, a lot of companies will do a dilution and then things will be fine for a while. But in this case, that wasn't the situation. Now, to be honest about diluting shareholders, many growth stocks do that in this phase. When the company is growing, when it's starting out, it's something that you see. It's very common. And not only for that, in the case of Nano Dimensions, you have to think about what's going on in the world right now. There's been this pandemic, sales have been hurt, and it's affecting many different companies. So they have to stay afloat, and it's better to dilute shareholders than have to produce more debt, because that's just going to eat away at other things. And there is a catalyst, though, that is not really being looked at here. And that's what I need to talk about, because this is a pretty big situation here. And that actually has to do with their dilution, because they diluted twice here in 2021. We know they diluted in January and diluted in February. And what that is that's $832 million in cash proceeds that the company raised. Now, when I talked about how much cash they had at the end of Q4 2020, we know that they had $671 million in cash and short-term investments during that time, which is a lot of money. Now, when we think about it, though, the amount of money that they have in cash is actually about the same amount of money that their market cap is. Interesting to think about that. And what makes more sense is why we're seeing investments still into Nano Dimensions by other big investment firms. And we'll just go right to ARK Invest, because that seems to be a favorite amongst a lot of people, and they're also like the largest shareholder of Nano Dimensions. Not only that. So as far as things go with ARK Invest, so this is ARK's Autonomous Technology and Robotics ETF, ticker symbol ARKQ, and they have quite a bit of shares in this one. Nano Dimensions is the 23rd largest holding in this. It makes up 1.59% of the entire portfolio. And there is a lot of shares sitting in this one. And that's not the only one that ARK has invested into. It's also in ARK's Next Generation Internet ETF, ARKW, where Nano Dimensions is kind of low on this list. It makes up 0.61% of the entire ETF. But you can see that it's also invested in there. And ARK actually has it attached to another ETF as well, and it's attached to ARK's Israel Innovation Technology ETF, IZRL, and in this one, it's sitting pretty low on the list as well. It makes up a little bit more than 1% of the entire ETF, but they have a bunch of shares in that as well. So ARK makes up a giant chunk of Nano Dimensions market cap. And not only that, if Cathie Wood sees that there is a good investment in this stock, then you have to kind of also look at that, because in my opinion, she does know what she's talking about, and she's managing other people's money, and it will be a bad thing if she was to lose it. So we're talking about smart money invested into Nano Dimensions, and a lot of it, by the way. So with that being said, that there's a lot of smart money invested in this company, that they have just about as much cash as they do as their market cap, and we know that they don't really need that much money to run their business, because we saw what their liabilities were, and it wasn't that extreme in comparison to the amount of cash they have. So they have plenty of money to do the things that they need to do to keep their business going and to produce their products. So we could be seeing some big things in the future here. What will be really interesting is what happens when we see their next earnings report. No clue when that's going to happen. Hopefully we're going to see that probably in the next couple months. But from there, hopefully some positivity. So with all that being said, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on Nano Dimensions. Do you think that this is going to be going up from here? Or do you think that this stock probably has more to drop before we see it turn around? So As always, everybody, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. New videos coming out on my channel all the time. Thanks for watching.